So we're going to be talking about Philippians 2 today and really just covering all the bases. So I just wanted to start off with verses 1 through 4. I feel like that's like the principle of what he wants us to apply to our daily lives. You know, that's kind of our foundation and our start. And then I feel like 5 through 11 kind of tackles almost like how Jesus executed that and him giving us like that very practical example. Mm-hmm. And so here right off the bat, there's no playing around when it comes to Philippians 2. Yeah. Right? They're with it, right? And so it says in verse 2, then make me truly happy by agreeing wholeheartedly with each other, loving one another, and working together with one mind and one purpose. And so I think oftentimes we can agree with other people. Like, I don't feel like that's super hard, especially if it's something like really simple. Others of us, though, when it comes to like choosing what we want for dinner, like you and your boyfriend trying to pick what you want for dinner, it's a mess. It's catastrophic, you know? And so sometimes being in unity is hard and sometimes it's rather simple. But here, not only does it say to be in unity, but to be with one mind. Yeah. Like, it even takes it like a step further than like, not only should you agree on something, you should agree wholeheartedly. And so I feel like the portrayal of unity here is not only that it should happen, but that it's essential to life and to relationships. And so oftentimes when I think about the opposite of being unified, I think of pride. And I feel as though pride really is the division of what it means to be unified. Yeah. And so that's kind of how we kick off here. Aspen, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think even while we look at that portion, it's important to remember that being unified and being of one mind and one purpose does not necessarily mean agreeing 100% on everything. You and I don't have to be in agreement over certain things, but we do need to be unified in our overall goal, which in the gospel is getting that word out to people. Mm-hmm. We need to be unified in our mission of evangelism, of spreading the good news of Jesus to others. We do not have to be unified in what we believe about women in ministry, what it looks like to baptize people. And those are the ways that we separate our just doctrine in Christianity. So we have 3 categories of primary doctrine, which this is Jesus is the Son of God. He's God incarnate. He, no one comes to the Father except through Jesus. The Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, 3 in 1. They are the Trinity. They are God. That's our primary. If we disagree on that, you're not a Christian, or I'm not a Christian. Like, one of us isn't, because that's what it means to be a Christian. Right. We have to be in 100% agreement on those things. Mm-hmm. Then there's secondary issues. These are like, well, we might go to a different church because we think a little bit differently when it comes to how infants should be baptized or shouldn't be, whatever. We might be of different denominations, but we're still Christians. I still support you, whatever. Mm-hmm. Then there's tertiary issues, which is like our 3rd level. This is the lowest level of like, we could be still going to the same church and we just have a slight bend in difference of what we agree on. And the reality is that we are all going to disagree in some capacity on some level about what we think, about how we interpret the word, about what we think about theology-wise, who God is. Like, and I say that loosely. I think that we all should agree on who God is. Mm-hmm. There are certain aspects of how to apply that that we may differentiate on. Yeah. And those fall into tertiary issues a lot of times. And they're really just not a big deal. They're fun to talk about. We can talk about it all we want, but at the end of the day, we're in unity.
Yeah. No, that's so good. I mean, to go even further in that, now we're hopping into verse 3. It says, don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. I just want to pause there.
Yeah.
That stretched me. That was like, when I heard that. Because truly, like, to think of somebody as better than myself, I had to dig a little deeper. And the biggest thing that the Lord revealed to me, and this is how I understand it, and tell me if you get something that you're like, no, Alexa, I don't really agree with that. But it was where, for example, like I used to run, right? I was a runner in college. That's something that I was really skilled at. And I would maybe see somebody who wasn't running in college, or maybe somebody that was younger than me, didn't have the same skill set as me. But they were not less valuable than me because they can't perform the same skill. Yeah. And so that's kind of what I got from this. It's like, there's so much internally that only God sees, that I don't know everything that goes on within you. You don't know everything that goes on with me. And so I want to value you as for what you are, and for, not what I see from surface level, not from the skill sets that you have, or how well you coordinate, or how well you can do this, that, and the other. It's like, that's what I personally got from that.
Yeah.
But
that's really good. I agree with you for sure. It comes down to really that we are of the same value. Now, as Christ followers, we are supposed to elevate other people. Jesus says, I'm gentle and lowly. The God of the universe, which we're about to get into that, is gentle and lowly, like lowly as in like humble. If that's what Christ was like, if that's how he identified, that's how I need to identify.
Yeah.
And so, while in the Father's eyes, we are of equal value, I'm going to choose to lower myself and elevate you and say, hey, before you serve me, let me serve you, actually. Yeah. And that's what I think that verse is talking about. But before we move forward, I don't want to brush past that like first part of don't be selfish and don't try to impress others. So good. Don't try to impress others. I feel like that's something culturally we as Americans specifically all do. We are always trying to impress other people. Yeah. And my question is why? And I think that when we look at the further verse down in chapter 2, it says in verse 12, and I'm only saying part of it, work hard to show the results of your salvation, obeying God with deep reverence and fear. Now, if we look at that and we're trying to be obedient to the Lord, but we're also trying to impress others, who is it most important that you impress? Are you worried about impressing others so much that you forget about, hey, the most important thing is actually impressing God? Yeah. And that's something that Pastor Matt and Jessica have talked about before, is I'd way rather offend you than offend my God. And so are you doing that? Are you impressing the Lord first and foremost? And that's where that obedience, that reverence, and that fear comes. Now, I also want to differentiate and point out that reverence and fear are used as two different words. Now, a lot of times in sermons and whatever, when you're talking with people, they'll say, when the fear of the Lord is mentioned, they'll say, well, that's just a reverential fear. It is absolutely a reverential fear.
But there's also that other part.
But there's also literal fear. Now, I'm not saying like shrinking back. No, we're called to go boldly before the throne of grace.
Yeah.
But there is an aspect of like, if God told me, Aspen, you're going to experience my wrath tomorrow, I would be terrified.
Yeah.
And you should be. That's fear.
Yeah.
Now, that's not like, oh, like I can never talk to God. I'm not good enough. Like, I'm going to hide now. Mm-hmm. No, that's not, you're not supposed to act like that. You're not supposed to be literally afraid of him.
Yeah.
It's understanding that like, dude, God's powerful.
Yeah.
He is, and he should be feared, and he should be revered. Yeah. Because he's God, and I'm not God.
Yeah. No, that's so good. I love how you said that there is a difference between that, because we don't want to sugarcoat that. We don't want to brush past every aspect of, or a certain aspect of God, to just overlook it and look at other things. Like, for example, like you said, like with reverence, like 100%. But with fear, too, that oftentimes reminds me of like your relationship with your parents. Yeah. You know, it's like you respect your parents, but you also know that if you do something wrong and they catch you doing something wrong, you're scared a little bit. You're like, mm-hmm. You know? And so there's that difference between respect. I love how you mentioned that. That's so good. And how you said how our pastors are really humble, and they are good at pointing out how to be humble by example. Yeah. So I love how you talked about that. But if you're trying to impress others and you care about what they say goes. Like you're kind of chained to that. So if you try to impress them and it works and they're really happy with you, then great, you're happy for a moment. But the second you try to impress people, or your attitude is dictated on what they think of you, it could easily go the other way. And so that's why it's saying, don't be selfish, don't impress others, be humble. Because their opinion could matter if you allow it to matter too much, when really it should just be God's opinion that matters the most. So I love how you said that.